200 guests. That's how many people were standing on the manicured lawn of the Oakwood estate in Virginia, watching my daughter Savannah's dream wedding turn into a nightmare. The sun was just beginning to dip behind the ancient oak trees, casting that perfect golden hour glow that photographers charge a premium for. Everything was supposed to be flawless. I had paid over $80,000 for the venue alone. The white roses were imported from Ecuador. The string quartet was playing a soft rendition of Pachelbel's Canon, and my wife, Martha, looked more beautiful than I had seen her in years. Martha was wearing a custom-made silver silk dress. She had spent months finding the right fabric, something that didn't outshine the bride but made her feel like the mother of the groom and the hostess of the evening. She was glowing, moving through the crowd with a grace that only she possesses, making sure every guest had a drink and every flower girl had her basket. She was happy, truly happy. And that's what made what happened next so unforgivable. I was standing near the Champagne Tower, talking to our old friend and family lawyer, Simon Vance, when I saw Chloe approaching. Chloe is my son Nathan's wife. They've been married for 2 years, and in those 2 years she has treated my wife like an obstacle to be cleared rather than a member of the family. Chloe was dressed in a deep emerald gown, her eyes scanning the crowd like she was looking for a target. She found one. Martha was standing near the edge of the terrace, laughing at something Savannah's new husband had said. She didn't see Chloe coming. Chloe was holding a large, overfilled glass of Cabernet Sauvignon, the darkest red wine on the menu. I saw it happen in slow motion. Chloe didn't trip. She didn't stumble. She reached the spot right behind Martha, her eyes locked onto the back of that silver silk dress, and she simply tipped her hand. The wine hit Martha's back like a splash of blood. The silver fabric soaked it up instantly, the red stain spreading from her shoulder blades down to the hem in a jagged, ugly streak. Martha gasped, the cold liquid shocking her. She spun around, her hands flying to her chest, her eyes wide with confusion. Chloe was standing there, her empty glass still tilted, a look of faux horror plastered on her face that didn't even reach her eyes. "Oh my God, Martha, I am so sorry," Chloe squealed, her voice loud enough to make the guests nearby turn their heads. "I stepped on a stone. My ankle just gave out. I'm such a klutz." The string quartet faltered and then stopped. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Martha didn't say a word. She looked down at her ruined dress, her lip trembling. She had worked so hard to make this day perfect for Savannah, and now she was standing in the middle of the terrace, humiliated, covered in wine that looked like a violent wound. But it wasn't Chloe's fake apology that broke my heart. It was Nathan, my son. He was standing 5 feet away, a beer in his hand. He watched the whole thing. He saw the way Chloe had aimed that glass, and instead of rushing to his mother's side, instead of calling out his wife for her cruelty, he stepped up to Chloe and put his arm around her waist. He leaned down and whispered something in Chloe's ear, and then he laughed. Not a nervous laugh. A genuine shared laugh, like they were 2 co-conspirators enjoying a private joke at someone else's expense. That's when the coldness settled into my chest. Not anger, not yet. Something much deeper than that. It was the feeling of a door locking. I didn't go to Martha. Savannah was already moving toward her, her face white with shock, her bridal bouquet forgotten on a nearby table. Simon Vance was looking at me, his face grim. "Arthur," he whispered, "tell me you're not going to let that slide." I didn't answer him. I walked slowly toward the band setup at the edge of the terrace. The band leader, a young guy who looked terrified of the sudden silence, saw me coming and practically handed me the microphone before I even asked. I tapped it once. The sound echoed across the Oakwood estate, sharp and final. Every face in that crowd of 200 turned toward me. Chloe was still smiling, leaning into Nathan's chest. They thought the show was over. They thought this was just another moment Martha would have to get over for the sake of family peace. They were wrong. The red wine was still dripping from the hem of Martha's dress, but in my mind, I wasn't just seeing the stain of that Cabernet. I was seeing the cumulative marks of 2 years of psychological warfare. You see, an incident like this, a physical shove or a deliberate spill, is never the starting point. It's the climax. It's what happens when someone decides they've finally gathered enough power to stop being subtle. When Nathan first introduced us to Chloe, Martha was overjoyed. We've lived in this Virginia house for 30 years, and Martha has always been the heart of it. She's the kind of woman who remembers the birthday of our mail carrier's kids and spends weeks knitting blankets for the local shelter. She welcomed Chloe with open arms, a home-cooked meal, and a genuine desire to be the mother Chloe said she never really had. But looking back, I realized that for Chloe, Martha's kindness wasn't a gift. It was a threat. It started with small things, microaggressions that are hard to point out without sounding like you're overreacting. We'd be at a family dinner, and Chloe would talk over Martha as if she weren't speaking. Or she'd make little comments about Martha's quaint taste in decor, always using that word like a polite synonym for garbage. I remember last Thanksgiving. Martha had spent 2 days preparing her grandmother's traditional stuffing. It was Nathan's favorite. When it was placed on the table, Chloe took one bite, put her fork down with a loud clink, and sighed. "It's so heavy, Martha," she had said, loud enough for the whole table to hear. "I worry about Nathan's cholesterol. I've actually started him on a Mediterranean meal plan. We really should be moving away from these heavy traditional things." Martha's face had fallen, but she'd just smiled and said she'd try something lighter next time. Nathan? He just kept eating, nodding along with his wife, never once saying, "Hey, this is the stuffing I grew up loving." That was the pattern. Chloe would strike, and Nathan would provide the silence she needed for the venom to sink in. Then there was the engagement party. Chloe had insisted on planning it herself at a high-end bistro in D.C. When we arrived, we found that Martha and I had been seated at a small corner table near the kitchen door, while Chloe's professional network and college friends occupied the center of the room. When I asked Nathan about the seating chart, he'd shrugged. "Chloe handled the logistics, Dad. It's a space issue. Don't make it a thing." But it was a thing. Every choice Chloe made was designed to push Martha into the shadows. She wanted to be the new matriarch of the Caldwell family, but she didn't want to earn the position through love or respect. She wanted to seize it by making Martha look obsolete. 6 months ago, the silent venom turned into open hostility. We were at their apartment for a Sunday brunch. Martha had brought a bouquet of lilies from our garden. Chloe didn't even put them in water. She left them on the kitchen counter to wilt. Later that afternoon, I overheard them in the hallway. "Your mother is just so suffocating, Nathan." Chloe's voice was sharp, a jagged edge that cut through the afternoon quiet. "She's always hovering, always offering advice that worked in the 1980s but is useless now. She's embarrassing when we're around my colleagues. She doesn't know how to talk about anything other than her garden and her charities. She's just trying to help, Chloe," Nathan had muttered, his voice weak. "No, she's trying to stay relevant," Chloe snapped. "And I'm tired of it. This is our life now. She needs to understand that she's a guest, not a participant." Martha had heard it too. I saw her standing by the window, her hands clasped tight, staring at those wilting lilies. She didn't cry. She never does. She just became smaller, quieter, as if she were trying to take up less space so Chloe wouldn't have a reason to strike again. But I'm a man who spent 30 years in corporate law. I know that bullies don't stop when you give them space. They just take the territory you vacated. The wedding planning for Savannah, my daughter, the light of my life, should have been a joyful time for Martha, but Chloe made it a battlefield. Even though she wasn't the bride, she inserted herself into every decision, trying to edge Martha out of the traditional mother of the bride roles. She told Savannah that Martha's dress choice was too bridal, forcing my wife to find a new one at the last minute. She told the florist that Martha's input was no longer needed for the centerpieces. Every time Martha came home from a planning session, she looked exhausted. Not the good kind of tired you feel after a long day of work, but the hollowed-out exhaustion of a person who has been told, over and over again, that their presence is a burden. "Arthur, maybe I should just stay home for the rehearsal dinner," Martha had said to me 2 nights ago. "I don't want to cause any tension. Chloe seems so stressed." "You are the mother of the bride, Martha," I had told her, taking her hands in mine. "This is your house. This is your family. You are not the source of the tension. You are the target of it. And I am done letting you stand there alone. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could just keep my eyes on the horizon and wait for the wedding to be over. I thought if I kept the checks flowing into Chloe's new business venture, it would act as a sort of peace tax. Keep her happy, keep her busy, keep her away from my wife." I was wrong. Money doesn't buy character. It only funds the arrogance of those who lack it. Standing there on that terrace, seeing the red wine soak into Martha's silver silk, and hearing my son's shared laugh with the woman who just assaulted his mother. I realized that the peace tax had failed. The debt was due, and I was going to collect it in full. To understand why I felt so much power in that moment on the terrace, you have to understand the nature of the golden handcuffs I had placed on Chloe's wrists 18 months ago. Chloe didn't come from money, but she had a taste for it that was insatiable. She wanted the lifestyle she saw in the glossy magazines of Northern Virginia, and she decided that her business, Vantage Boutique and Spa, was going to be her ticket to the local elite. The problem was, Chloe had the ambition of a CEO, but the credit score of someone who had spent their 20s treating credit cards like confetti. When she and Nathan first approached me with the business plan, I saw the flaws immediately. The projections were over-optimistic. The overhead for a prime location in Old Town Alexandria was astronomical, and she had zero collateral. No bank in the state would have given her a dime without a miracle. I was that miracle. "Arthur, this is more than just a shop," she had told me during a lunch at our house, her voice full of that practiced sweet manipulation she used before she got what she wanted. "It's a brand. It's about wellness and luxury. I just need someone to believe in me." I looked at Nathan, and he looked at me with those pleading eyes that reminded me of when he was 6 years old asking for a puppy. I've spent 30 years in corporate law and private equity. I knew this was a bad investment, but I thought, stupidly, that if I gave her this, if I funded her dream, she would finally have the security she needed to stop feeling threatened by Martha. I thought I was buying a peaceful retirement. I didn't just write a check. I set it up the way I set up everything, with layers of protection that she was too blinded by greed to read carefully. I facilitated a $500,000 line of credit through my old firm's banking partners. I didn't just give her the money, I signed as the personal guarantor. This meant that while the business was in her name, the lifeblood of the operation, the credit that paid the lease, the high-end inventory, and the celebrity stylists she insisted on hiring, was entirely dependent on my signature. In the contract, tucked away in the standard commercial guarantees section, was a clause I had used a dozen times in my career. Section 9. It stated that the guarantor had the right to revoke their guarantee at any time, with written notice to the lender, if they felt the business's direction or the borrower's conduct posed a reputational risk to the guarantor. If I revoked that guarantee, the entire $500,000 balance would become immediately due and payable within 30 days. If she couldn't pay, and I knew she couldn't, the bank would move to seize everything, the inventory, the fixtures, and even the lease rights. Chloe signed it without a second thought. She was too busy picking out the Italian marble for the spa's foyer and ordering custom-embossed stationery. Once the doors of Vantage Boutique and Spa opened, the mask didn't just slip, it was discarded. She started treating the business like her personal kingdom, and Martha like a commoner who wasn't allowed past the gates. She held a grand opening gala for 500 people, local influencers, politicians, the social set she so desperately wanted to belong to. Martha and I were invited, of course, but when we arrived, Chloe's assistant told us there had been a mix-up with the VIP seating. Martha was ushered to a back corner near the service entrance, while Chloe sat center stage, surrounded by people who didn't even know her last name. I watched Chloe that night, draped in silk and dripping in jewelry that my credit line had likely paid for. She didn't thank Martha for the weeks Martha had spent helping her pack boxes, or the hours Martha had spent listening to her vent about contractors. She didn't even acknowledge us in her speech. She had what she wanted, the money, the status, and the golden handcuffs that she thought were just beautiful bracelets. "Don't worry about it, Arthur," Martha had whispered that night, seeing my jaw tighten. "She's just excited, it's her big night." But it wasn't just one night. It was every day after. Chloe began using the boutique as a weapon. She would forget to invite Martha to the family events she hosted there. She would make snide comments about how Martha's wardrobe wasn't exactly on brand for the boutique's image. She was building her empire on the foundation of my wife's dignity, and she truly believed I would keep pouring concrete into that foundation forever. She thought she was untouchable because she was family. She thought that because she had married my son and given us the promise of future grandchildren, I would never have the stomach to pull the rug out from under her. She mistook my silence for weakness. She mistook my investment for a gift. Standing on that terrace at Savannah's wedding, watching the red wine soak into Martha's dress, I realized that the golden handcuffs were about to become a noose. I had given Chloe everything she needed to succeed, and she had used it to become the kind of person who would humiliate her own mother-in-law for sport. I looked at Nathan, still laughing with his wife while his mother stood in ruins. I looked at Chloe, whose eyes were already darting around to see who else had witnessed her triumph. I reached into my tuxedo pocket and felt the cold glass of my phone. I wasn't just her father-in-law anymore. I was the client of record. I was the guarantor. And as of this moment, the Vantage Boutique and Spa was officially out of business. We didn't stay for the cake. We didn't stay for the first dance or the champagne toasts. After I handed that microphone back to the band leader, I walked over to Martha, took her hand and led her away from the terrace. Savannah followed us out to the valet stand, her white bridal gown trailing on the gravel, her eyes red from crying. "Dad, please don't go," she whispered, clutching my arm. "I'll talk to Nathan. I'll make Chloe apologize." "Savannah, honey, this is your night," I told her, kissing her forehead. "Go back inside. Dance with your husband. But your mother cannot spend another minute in this dress, being looked at like a spectacle." The drive back to our hotel in Alexandria was the quietest 30 minutes of my life. The air conditioning in the car hummed, and the smell of fermented grapes filled the cabin, the scent of Chloe's accident. Martha sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the passing streetlights. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just looked exhausted, like a woman who had finally run out of reasons to be kind. When we reached our suite at the Ritz, the concierge looked at Martha's ruined silver dress with a mixture of horror and pity. We ignored the stares and went straight to the room. Inside, Martha went into the bathroom to peel off the silk that was now stained a deep, bruised purple. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my laptop. My hands were steady. That's the thing about 30 years in corporate law. When the world starts burning, you don't panic. You look for the fire extinguisher. I opened the folder on my desktop labeled Family Investments. I scrolled past the college funds and the retirement accounts until I found the one I needed. Vantage Boutique and Spa, Personal Guarantee Agreement. I read through the document one more time, my eyes stopping on Section 9. The guarantor reserves the right to revoke this guarantee at any time, with written notice to the lender, if the guarantor determines that the borrower's conduct poses a risk to the guarantor's reputation or the security of the investment. Chloe thought this was about her business. She didn't realize that in my world everything is about character. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. It was 11:45 p.m. on a Saturday. Richard Chen, my financial advisor for over 2 decades, answered on the third ring. "Arthur, is everything okay? I thought you were at Savannah's wedding." Richard's voice was thick with sleep. "I was, Richard. But something happened. I need you to flag the Vantage Boutique line of credit for immediate revocation. First thing Monday morning, I want the formal notice delivered to the bank." There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear Richard shifting in bed, probably reaching for his glasses. "Arthur, you know what that does, right? That line is the only thing keeping that boutique alive. If you pull the guarantee, the bank will call the full $500,000 balance. Chloe doesn't have that kind of liquidity." "I know exactly what it does, Richard," I said, my voice as cold as the ice in the hotel minibar. "I'm not funding cruelty anymore. I'm not rewarding a woman who thinks it's acceptable to humiliate my wife in front of 200 people while my son stands by and laughs." "Nathan was involved?" Richard asked, his tone shifting to professional concern. "He chose his side, Richard. Now I'm choosing mine. Process the paperwork. Use the reputational risk clause. I want the bank to understand that I am no longer the safety net for that business." "Done," Richard said. "I'll have the electronic notice time-stamped tonight. The bank's legal team will have it in their inbox before they even have their first cup of coffee on Monday." I hung up and sat there in the dark. A few minutes later, the bathroom door opened. Martha came out wearing a hotel robe, her hair wet from the shower. She saw the laptop open, the legal documents glowing on the screen. "What did you do, Arthur?" she asked quietly, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I revoked the guarantee on Chloe's boutique, Martha. By mid-morning on Monday, the bank will be demanding their $500,000 back." Martha looked at me for a long time. I expected her to argue. I expected her to tell me it was too much, that we should try to talk to Nathan one more time, that family is more important than a silver dress. But she didn't. She looked at her hands, then back at me. She called me the help last month, Arthur, Martha whispered. At her boutique. She told her new assistant I was just a volunteer from a local charity who didn't know anything about luxury brands. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to cause trouble for Nathan. I felt a surge of anger so sharp it made my vision blur. And you still helped her? You still went to her shop and packed boxes? I wanted my son to be happy, she said, her voice breaking. But tonight, seeing him laugh while I was standing there in that mud, no, that wine, I realized he's not happy. He's just a coward, and she's a predator. Well, the predator just lost her claws, I said, closing the laptop with a definitive click. They're going to lose the boutique. They might even lose the house if Nathan used his personal assets as secondary collateral. It's going to be ugly, Martha. I know, she said, lying back against the pillows. But for the first time in 2 years, I don't feel like I'm waiting for the next blow to fall. If they want our support, they have to respect us. If they don't, they can figure out how to live on their own. I leaned over and kissed her cheek. Get some sleep. Monday is going to be a very long day for our son and his wife. As I laid down next to her, I thought about Nathan's face at the wedding. I thought about that shared laugh with Chloe. They thought they were the new power couple, the ones who could push the older generation into the shadows and take what they wanted. They were about to find out that a foundation built on someone else's money is only as strong as the person who signed the checks. And my pen was officially dry. Monday morning didn't arrive with the usual quiet of a Virginia suburb. For me, it arrived at 8:02 a.m. with the aggressive vibration of my phone against the mahogany desk in my home office. I was sitting there, a cup of black coffee in my hand, watching the sunlight hit the trees outside. Martha was in the garden, finally pruning the roses she had neglected during the wedding chaos. She looked peaceful, but I knew that peace was fragile, held together by the fact that I had finally stood up for her. The caller ID was Nathan. I let it ring. I wanted him to feel the weight of the silence, the same way Martha had felt the weight of the silence on that terrace when he laughed. It rang until it went to voicemail. 10 seconds later, it started again. I picked it up on the 4th ring. Dad? Dad, are you there? Nathan's voice was high-pitched, vibrating with a panic I hadn't heard since he crashed his first car in high school. I'm here, Nathan, I said, my voice as level as a judge's gavel. Dad, what the hell is going on? Chloe is at the boutique, and there's a courier here from the bank. They just handed her a formal notice. They're saying the personal guarantee has been revoked. They're demanding the full $500,000 balance, Dad. $500,000 within 30 days. I took a slow sip of my coffee. That sounds accurate, Nathan. Richard Chen is very efficient when he wants to be. Efficient? Dad, this is a death sentence for her business. We don't have that kind of money sitting around. Everything we have is tied up in the inventory and the lease. If the bank calls this loan, we lose everything. We might even lose our personal savings. Why would you do this? Why now? You know why, Nathan, I said, the coldness finally entering my voice. I told you on Saturday, I will not be associated with cruelty. Not from a stranger, and certainly not from my own daughter-in-law. Is this about the wine? Nathan's voice was incredulous. Dad, it was an accident. Chloe was stressed. She tripped on her heels. Stop lying to me, Nathan, I interrupted. And more importantly, stop lying to yourself. I saw her face. I saw the way she aimed that glass. And I saw you. I saw you put your arm around her and laugh while your mother was standing there humiliated in front of 200 people. You didn't help her up. You didn't check if she was okay. You chose your side. I'm just letting you live with the consequences of that choice. Suddenly the phone was muffled, some scuffling in the background, and then a new voice pierced through the line. It was Chloe. Gone was the sweet, manipulative tone she used at family dinners. This was pure, unadulterated fury. Arthur, are you seriously doing this? She screamed. You're going to destroy my life, my dream, everything I've built over a stupid silver dress? Do you have any idea how much work I've put into this boutique? I have a very good idea, Chloe, I replied. I also have a very good idea of how much of my money went into that marble foyer and those custom fixtures. You didn't build that business. I funded it. And I didn't fund it so you could use the status it gave you to treat my wife like a servant. I sent her a text. I said I was sorry, she yelled. You sent a disclaimer, not an apology. You said you were sorry if she was hurt. That's not remorse, Chloe. That's damage control. You thought you could treat Martha like garbage because you were family, and I'd just keep the checks flowing. You miscalculated. We'll sue you, she spat. This is retaliatory. Our lawyer says, your lawyer is likely charging you $500 an hour to tell you what you want to hear, I said, leaning back in my chair. But my lawyer and the bank's legal team know that Section 9 of the guarantee agreement is ironclad. I have the right to revoke for reputational risk. And after your performance on Saturday, you are a massive reputational risk. I won't have my name attached to a woman who thinks physical aggression is an acceptable social tool. Dad, please. Nathan's voice was back on the line, pleading now. Think about what this does to us. We're your family. If we lose the boutique, we can't pay our mortgage. You're punishing me too. You punished yourself, Nathan, when you stood by and watched that happen. You had every chance to step up. You could have walked her over to apologize on Saturday night. You could have called your mother yesterday morning without being prompted. You did neither. You spent all day yesterday celebrating the success of the wedding while Martha sat in our hotel room wondering what she did to make her son hate her so much. I don't hate her, Dad. Then show it, I said. But not to me, and not with words. You have 30 days to find a new guarantor or $500,000. I suggest you start making some calls, because as of this morning my bank accounts are closed to you. I didn't wait for his reply. I hung up the phone and set it face down on the desk. Outside, I saw Martha look up from her roses. She saw me through the office window and gave a small, sad nod. She knew the storm had started, but for the first time in 2 years, she didn't look like she was afraid of getting wet. She knew she had someone standing over her with an umbrella, and that person was me. By Wednesday, the fallout from the Oakwood Estate incident had moved from a family feud to a full-scale legal war. My office phone was ringing off the hook, but I wasn't taking calls from anyone without a law degree. Chloe had spent 48 hours in a state of manic desperation, and as I expected, she had finally run to the only people who still believed her lies, her parents. Robert and Diane Miller were the kind of people who viewed life as a series of social ladders to be climbed. They had spent their lives in Fairfax County pretending to be wealthier and more influential than they actually were. To them, Chloe's boutique wasn't just a business. It was their ticket into the Caldwell family's legacy. When the bank's demand letter hit Chloe's desk, the Millers didn't see an assault on my wife. They saw a threat to their social standing. I was sitting in my study when a formal letter arrived via courier from a firm I knew all too well, Thorne and Associates. Marcus Thorne was a shark, the kind of lawyer who specialized in reputational damage and contractual bad faith. The letter was 8 pages of pure intimidation. It claimed that my revocation of the guarantee was retaliatory, premeditated, and a direct breach of the implied covenant of good faith. They were threatening to sue me personally for tortious interference and were demanding that I reinstate the guarantee immediately or face a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. I didn't blink. I've written better threats in my sleep. But before I responded to Marcus, I had some homework to do. You see, when I first signed that guarantee 18 months ago, I had done a preliminary check on Chloe. Everything seemed fine on the surface. But after Saturday night, I decided to dig deeper. I didn't just look at her credit score this time. I used my old firm's resources to look into her consulting work in Florida before she met Nathan. What I found was the silent venom in its purest form. Chloe hadn't just moved to Virginia for a fresh start. She had fled Florida. 3 years ago, she had been a junior partner in a small interior design firm called Lux Living. The firm didn't just go out of business. It imploded. There were lawsuits involving missing client deposits, forged signatures on vendor contracts, and a very quiet out-of-court settlement that involved Chloe signing an NDA and a non-compete agreement. Her maiden name wasn't even Miller. That was her mother's maiden name she had legally adopted to bury the search results for Chloe Jenkins. I was still looking at the court records when the doorbell rang. It was Nathan and his father-in-law, Robert Miller. Robert didn't wait for me to invite him in. He pushed past me into the foyer, his face a deep shade of purple. "Arthur, this has gone far enough," Robert shouted, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "You are destroying Chloe's life over a misunderstanding. She's been in bed for 2 days crying her eyes out. Nathan tells me you've frozen her accounts. This is financial abuse, plain and simple." Nathan stood behind him, looking like a ghost. He wouldn't look me in the eye. "Dad, Marcus Thorne says we have a case. He says what you're doing is illegal. Please, just talk to them. Chloe is willing to sign a formal apology, whatever you want. Just don't let them take the boutique." I looked at my son, and for the first time I felt a wave of pity that outweighed my anger. "Nathan, Did she tell you about Lux living in Orlando?" The room went quiet. Robert's eyes darted to the left, a classic tell. He knew. Nathan, however, looked genuinely confused. "What are you talking about? She worked as a freelance consultant there." "She was a partner, Nathan," I said, handing him the folder I had printed out. "And she was sued for embezzling $60,000 from a client's renovation fund. Her parents, your father-in-law right here, paid off the debt to keep her out of jail, and she changed her name to Jenkins Miller to hide the trail. She didn't tell you, did she?" Nathan grabbed the folder, his hands shaking as he scanned the court documents. Robert tried to snatch it away, but Nathan stepped back. "Is this true, Robert?" Nathan whispered. "Did you know about this?" "It was a mistake, Nathan," Robert stammered. "She was young. She was misled by her partners." "She forged a client's signature, Robert." I stepped forward, my voice low and dangerous. "And she was doing it again. I had my auditor look at the Vantage Boutique's books this morning. She's been funneling marketing expenses into a private account that Nathan doesn't have access to. She wasn't just being cruel to Martha. She was preparing to leave Nathan high and dry the moment that boutique became profitable enough." Nathan dropped the folder. The papers scattered across the floor, white sheets of betrayal landing on the dark wood. He looked at the man who had been his father-in-law for 2 years, the man who had encouraged him to stand by Chloe even after she assaulted his mother. "She told me she loved me," Nathan said, his voice breaking. "She told me my family was the problem." "She used you as a shield, Nathan," I said, putting a hand on his shoulder. "She knew that as long as she was married to a Caldwell, I would be her bank. Saturday night wasn't just about wine. It was a test. She wanted to see if she could break Martha and still keep my money. She thought she had won you over completely." Robert Miller realized the game was up. He didn't offer an apology. He didn't ask for mercy. He just looked at me with pure hatred. "You think you're so much better than us, Arthur? You're just an old man with a checkbook." "And you," I replied, opening the front door, "are a man who is about to help his daughter move back into her childhood bedroom. Because by Friday the bank will have the keys to that boutique. Get out of my house." As Robert stormed out, Nathan collapsed into one of the chairs in the foyer. He put his head in his hands and finally, he started to cry. Not for Chloe, but for the 2 years he had spent defending a woman who never existed. The family was broken, the marriage was a crime scene, and the legal threats from Marcus Thorne were now nothing more than expensive paper. The golden hour was over. It was time for the long, cold night. It has been exactly 12 months since that sunset at the Oakwood estate. In Virginia, the seasons change with a predictable grace. But for the Caldwell family, the last year has been a tumultuous winter of the soul. I drove through Old Town Alexandria last week, past the corner where Vantage Boutique and Spa once stood. The gold-embossed lettering is gone. The Italian marble foyer I paid for now welcomes students to a boutique yoga studio. The end came quickly for Chloe's dream. When the bank called the loan, she realized that all her influencer friends were just ghosts in a digital machine. Not a single person offered her a loan. Her parents, Robert and Diane, couldn't cover a fraction of the debt. Within 45 days, the locks were changed, and the inventory was auctioned off for pennies on the dollar. The golden handcuffs didn't just break, they evaporated, leaving her with nothing but a mountain of legal debt and a reputation that was permanently stained, much like Martha's silver dress. Nathan and Chloe didn't survive the fallout. It's a sad, cliché story. When the money stops flowing, the love stops growing. Chloe spent months screaming at Nathan, blaming him for allowing me to destroy her life. She wanted him to sue me, to hate me, to break into our house and steal back what she felt was hers. But Nathan, broken and exhausted, finally saw the woman behind the mask. He filed for divorce in November. Chloe moved back to Idaho to live with an aunt, and from what I hear, she's back to working a retail floor, far away from the luxury she tried to steal. Nathan is living in a small one-bedroom apartment near the Pentagon City Metro now. He's working long hours, rebuilding his own career without the cushion of my bank account. We didn't speak for 6 months. The silence was heavy, like a physical weight in the house. But 3 weeks ago, he showed up at our front door. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for a new car. He just stood there looking older, thinner, and deeply humbled. "I'm sorry, Mom," he had said, looking at Martha. "I should have been the one to catch you. I should have been the one to walk you out. I was a coward. and I'll live with that for the rest of my life. Martha, being the woman she is, didn't lecture him. She didn't remind him of the wine or the laughter. She just opened her arms and let her son cry on her shoulder. We are rebuilding, slowly. There is still a distance between us, a cautiousness that wasn't there before. But we are standing on the same side of the line now. Savannah and her husband just celebrated their first anniversary. They're expecting our first grandchild in the fall. When Martha found out, she spent the entire weekend in her garden, humming to herself as she pruned the hydrangeas. She isn't the embarrassment or the help anymore. She is the matriarch of a family that finally understands the cost of respect. Looking back, people might say I overreacted. They might say that destroying a $500,000 business over a glass of spilled wine is the act of a vindictive old man. But they're wrong. The wine was just the catalyst. I didn't destroy a business. I stopped subsidizing a person who thought cruelty was a social currency. I protected my wife's dignity when my son wouldn't. Some debts are paid in cash and some are paid in character. Chloe and Nathan learned that lesson the hard way. And as for me, I still have the silver dress. Martha wanted to throw it away, but I had it professionally cleaned. The stain is gone, but if you hold it up to the light at just the right angle, you can still see the faint, jagged outline of where the wine hit. I keep it in my study as a reminder. It reminds me that some things are worth more than a bank balance. It reminds me that silence in the face of cruelty is the same as participation. The house is quiet now, but it's a good kind of quiet. Martha is knitting a blanket for the new baby. I'm sitting in my office, watching the sunset over the Virginia hills. My pen is still dry and my accounts are still closed to those who haven't earned them. But my heart is full. We lost a year of peace, but we gained a lifetime of self-respect. And in my world, that's the best return on investment I've ever made. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't an easy one to tell, but I believe it's an important one. If this story meant something to you, or if you believe that respect is the foundation of every family, please subscribe to the channel. There are many more stories like this, tales of betrayal, justice, and the ultimate price of respect. Click on the video showing up on your screen right now to hear what happens when another family's loyalty is put to the ultimate test. You won't want to miss it.